All right, so good morning, everyone. Hello and welcome to this webinar by the Global Farmer Network. Today's session is focused on succession planning, something that's been very near and dear to my hearts and a number of GFN members. My name is Tim Durham. I'm a farmer from outside New York City and a GFN member. Before we start, let me tell you a little bit about the Global Farmer Network. So established in the year 2000 by farmers, our focus is to connect, empower, and mobilize farmers worldwide. Our mission is to amplify the farmer's voice in promoting trade, technology, sustainable farming, economic growth, and food security. We believe in the power of knowledge transfer, which is why we created this webinar series. And we offer multiple approaches that focus on action, collaboration, and results that showcase agriculture as part of the solution to the main challenges facing humanity. This year, incidentally, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary, but we're also looking forward to the future, which is why today's topic is so relevant and timely. So again, thank you for joining us. We have two esteemed speakers today. The first is Vicente Bassoni, GFN member from Brazil and a successful farmer who has navigated the successional process. And also Joey Peck, a leading expert in farm business successional planning from Northstar Wealth Navigation. So without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker. And I'll leave Gina working behind the scenes to take care of that. And there's Joey. Okay.
Good morning. Gina, if you can give us the slides, that would be great. Thank you. As Tim said, it's great to be with you all this morning. Just a quick brief intro about me. I'm a private wealth lead advisor at Northstar Wealth Navigation. I'm a member of the Northwestern Mutual Private Client Group. I've got over 18 years experience as a client here, which equipped me with the opportunity to join as an advisor a couple of years ago. I'm a third generation farm kid. I was raised in the heart of the Midwest in the United States, and my passion is clearly creating and developing financial plans for now and the future when it comes to our clients and the community we serve. My background, the first 20 years of my careers was spent in finance and sales with companies such as Cargill, Allegion, and Ingersoll Rand. But I was born and raised into an entrepreneurial family that created this mindset of, I was born into a farm family, and we also had an excavating company. I got to start serving customers at age 6, which led me to this client first mentality and really value driven mindset. I do hold the Ag Econ and finance degrees from the University of Missouri. To set up this conversation though, I just do want to provide a little bit of context. For my portion anyway, I think it's critical that we consider our succession, be it large or small, because the size of our succession is a relative term. Each of us as adults have a personal enterprise that we're the CEO of, or the co-CEO for those of us that have partners. But therefore, we all have a role to play in the succession of living out our journey and our legacy. So just keep that in mind, that this is for absolutely every one of us, regardless of business size or context. Next slide, please, Gina. Just a couple of, one more. From a statistics standpoint, I just want to give the setup, not to be scary, but just a reality check. 30% of family businesses survive into the second generation. I like to think about this from the positive perspective. Yes, 30% survive, but that means that 70% don't make it, which is a lot. The most interesting part to me, though, is here's why they fail. And this was a study put on by the Family Business Institute recently. It's unprepared successors, lack of interest, conflict, and poor planning. Now, of all of these reasons, notice that 3 out of 4 of these I consider to be completely controllable. I only suggest that a lack of interest, if we're thinking inside of a family, may or may not be within our control. And I'm a big fan of let's not force things. But if 3 of the 4 of these are controllable, we're left with a much higher probability of success, which I think is extremely encouraging. Now, just from a mindset perspective, I think it starts from both perspectives in the work that I've seen personally and professionally. But as the owner or successor, we've got to ask the right questions, as basic as it may seem. Notice I've got the owner on the left, the potential successors on the right. But regardless, both of us have to be open, transparent, and honest with our feedback. From a personal perspective, our personal financials have got to be in order, in addition to our financial health of the business itself. It's very difficult or next to impossible to think about letting go of something if you are not 100% confident in your own personal livelihood for the rest of your life, especially as we think about as we get older and we may or may not be able to work as we love working these days. So having the own personal financials is critical. As an owner, part of creating our legacy for the next generation is recognizing that what got us here, what got you here in terms of building the operation, is not necessarily what will get your successor there. Now, I would argue hard work, hustle, grit, those all span generations and businesses that never go out of style. But the technical aspect, the financials, the other details likely have evolved. And through the operation, well, they'll need to change over time. It's your job as the owner to identify and develop others with potential. And you may or may not have the skills to do so. And that's okay. But it's identifying what those skills and gaps are and getting the help from outside. Now, I will speak to the potential successors for a moment. Remember that really none of this operation existing is really yours. So what are you doing to build your skills? Would you hire you to take on the operation based upon your strengths and talent that you bring to the operation? If not, it's really important to ask for help from others outside to better prepare yourself. That prepares you not only to be a potential successor, but as a business owner and as a human, we all want to be focused on continuous growth. And finally, your mission is to live out the legacy that's been built. And that's so critically important to think about with our loved ones. Let's talk about financial health. Have you ever heard the phrase, when you get on a flight, passengers with children, secure your own mask before helping others secure their mask? Do you have a written financial plan that's integrated with all of your personal financials? Is it viable for the expected and the unexpected for the rest of your life? This is the foundation. The second piece is creating your team of experts, seeking out the relationships with people and or firms in your communities and where you live and work. The goal is that the work that you do together with building the foundation of these relationships really helps carry into the next generation of owners. You likely cannot do this solely on your own. And finally, I'll leave you with this from a financial health perspective. What a privilege it is to have built something in your lifetime worth passing down to the next generation or for ownership. That is a real accomplishment, and you should be proud of that. Let's talk about relationships on that note. If only 30% of businesses make it to the second generation, one of those 4 drivers of the high failure rate I mentioned earlier is conflict. A question I often ask is fair equal and or equal fair? Now there's no right or wrong answer, but it needs to be thought about and be able to communicate with others. Conflict often arises from our nonverbal communication. Actions often speak louder than words. And in the absence of verbal communication, people instinctively make up their own story. This creates hard feelings, it creates unintentional conflict. And the question is, do you want others making up a version of your story? Or would you like to take the opportunity to share your version of the story proactively? This is easier said than done, no question. But it really starts with communicating early and often Like now is a good time if you haven't started. And to keep in mind, these plans could be 3 or 5 or 10 plus years out. Just having them written and verbally discussed is so critical. Again, if you're not in a position to facilitate these discussions yourself, bring in outside help. The ultimate goal for me is partnering, me personally and professionally, is to avoid estate taxes and probate while protecting the values and the wishes of our loved ones. I say that I'm not a tax attorney, tax advisor, or an attorney. We partner with those professionals. I do personally and professionally to ensure those things are in place. And we often run into the situation where there's a scenario of a one-child successor of, I say, a 4-sibling family. I'm from a family with 4 girls, 4 daughters. But if one child is potentially a successor, what about the other 3 siblings? Are there enough other assets that the other 3 siblings could have an equal portion? Is there agreement in place to keep the farm together? Do you want the farm to stay together? Are there other off the farm sources of income streams that could help equalize things? And lastly, can the successor sibling afford to pay for their other siblings and still have a viable business? The point is, there are so many options when we have good, healthy, transparent discussions and relations with each other. Liquidity is vital and strong. It's so vital to having strong financial and relationship health that I'd be remiss if I didn't just call it the elephant in the room. Specifically in capital-intensive businesses such as farming, where the operation often lacks liquidity, it's so important by the very nature with land values and input costs to create liquidity. It can be needed for buyouts, for taxes, debt, maintaining operations, just simply the day-to-day. We've all heard the stories of the sibling that wanted out of the operation to cash out their portion, and the operation had to sell as a result. This is a sibling's right if that was in the estate plan documents. And with land prices so high in the US, at least right now, it's hard to blame them. But creating plans to address that liquidity is so important. A few ways to create or improve liquidity are life insurance, savings and investments. They can be structured by sell agreements or cross purchase agreements, and retained earnings out of the operation that can be dispersed out. Starting early and utilizing each other and additional resources is just so critical. The last thing I'll talk about is just a legacy and reflections. This should be something you look forward to. You want to feel inspired. You want to be excited for what's to come. As an owner, you've worked so hard to create what you've built. As a successor, what a privilege it is to be able to develop and grow yourself into a successor that can flourish yourself and the business into the next generation. And when we communicate with others regularly on the plan and preparedness, it's a time to grow together, not a time of conflict. The fastest way to learn the financials in your business is to learn your personal financials. It's a lot less complex. It can be easier. And so I always encourage people to start there. And the 3 questions I would like for you to consider as we end our time of this portion together are: what questions do you need to ask of others? What action will you take today as a next step? And who do you need to add to your team? We aren't going to cover questions right this moment, but I would say our team at North Star Wealth Navigation works with families to build out legacy plans. I am offering a complimentary integrated financial plan to those attendees in the US that is intended to be used as a launch pad for starting down your journey or to consider taking it to the next level. As I said before, we're not tax advisors or estate planning attorneys, though we do partner with them often and nearly daily. But we do work with our clients to understand their goals, plan for the future, invest in that future, and protect what's been built. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Joey. Really appreciate that. A lot of that hits close to home for me, especially. And I'll have some directed questions for you later on in the webinar. But for now, let's bring on Vicente. His PowerPoint should be coming up. And we'll give you all some kind of boots on the ground, direct from the trench type analogies and discussions about this very important issue.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for introducing me. Like Tim said, I'm a farmer from Brazil. We've been working with governance and succession for the past 12 years already. I'm second generation in the family. We produce soybeans and corn. We also have a transport business. This year, we are also entering the cotton business. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of my perspective of what we see on a daily basis in operations, what we've done. And I'm not trying to say here that we are right in everything that we did or that this is the only path, but I'd like to really share you like a real case where you can see in the real life what's being done and how it works. Yeah. So to start with, what I've seen here in terms of mindset when you think about succession is what everybody wants, which is to pass the business from the parents to the children. Yeah. And I'm saying here first generation and second generation, but it can be second to third, or third to fourth, it doesn't matter. But typically the most difficult one is the first succession that you do. And of course, when you change, if you look horizontally here, when you change people in management, you change the style, the model, the culture of the management. It's impossible to have two people with the same mindset, with the same thinking. And so when you pass one business from the parents to the children, we are also changing the way the company works, basically. And what everybody aims is to do this straight ahead, go through, pass along all the succession from the parents to the children. And they start doing this or expecting this. Yeah, people want the kids to start in the business and start working, and telling them the way I do it, for example, or the way the parents did it in the past, and expect them to maybe work the same way. And soon enough, the children start to make moves, start to think by themselves, to gain more confidence. And that becomes a conflict because it's a different way. It's a different thinking. Like I said, it's a different mindset. And it doesn't matter here if you're right or wrong. It doesn't matter. It becomes a conflict because it's not being built together. Yeah, you have two different views, and often it becomes this fight between the parents and the children. The children say the parents doesn't give them enough space to work. The parents say my kid's not learning, it's not doing, it's not obeying, it's not saying, it's not doing what I say so. And so what we did and what I see that actually works is that you actually work in a preparation phase where parents and children work together and change the company together, prepare the company for this new management style that I'm calling, which again, it's a composition between the parents and the children and the market best practices. It's something that you build together. Yeah. And to be very clear, it's kind of preparing the company to be managed by anyone. Yeah. So the thinking here is if, like Joey said, do you see yourself as your successor, for example? Could you be that successor? So if you don't have a management in the company that's well structured enough for you or anybody in the market to manage it, your children won't be able to do it anyway. Yeah. So what we are trying to do, what I'm trying to show here, and what we've been doing, is to prepare the company in a new business model. And then, to be honest, it doesn't matter who gets the job, who becomes the next CEO, the next finance director, because the company will be ready, and you have tools and you have all the best practices in place, the management tools, to assess the development of the company, to assess the financial results, to say the role of the children in the company, and to kind of solve all the conflicts that the business can have. Yeah. So in the beginning, yeah, everything is this is a part of our diagnosis, so to say. 12 years ago, when we started this process, the doctors, so to say, or the consulting company that we started working with, brought to us this kind of reflection. Yeah, so we were with these symptoms. Yeah, we were discussing business on the family lunch on Sunday, and the company is paying for all the private bills, so you don't have a segregation of what's company and what's your private life. Everything is merged together. Often the children are told to stay in the company and learn everything in the company. Yeah, you don't need to go outside. Everything you need to learn is here. You don't have a payment or a salary structure for your cousins, brothers, so everybody gets some money from the company according to some of the parents' initiative. Normally the company is rich and the family is poor, which means that everything that you have is in the company. Yeah, there's no dividends, there's no private life, or the private life is within the company's books. Yeah. One for me that's maybe the worst one is emotion-based decisions. So you end up making decisions just to not make my son sad, or I don't want to bother my cousin with that, so let's do what he wants. This kind of hidden conflicts that you try to avoid, and it's not good for the business, and to be honest, it's not good for the family, because you don't have then like an open relationship. And one symptom is also that when people ask what you do, and you say, I'm the owner's son, yeah, as a position, and it's no company in the world that has this job title. So to be the owner's son is not a position in the company, and that's a symptom that we need to segregate a little bit these three spheres. Yeah, this is a very old model by John Davis. It's very settled in the governance world, and it's a way for us to organize ourselves, thinking in these three spheres, three perspectives of ownership, management, and family. And as the founders build the company, everything is all merged together, and you have family and everything all together, like I said before. And the job here is to try to segregate a little bit of each of these roles. Yeah. You can see by the image that it never gets fully separated. Yeah, it's impossible, because we are a family business, and we have many advantages in being a family business. The long-term thinking of a family business is proven to be way more effective than the market-driven companies. That's why they are never fully segregated. But we got to understand how they relate to each other, and what's the role, what's the job that you need to address in each of these spheres. So the first one that we started was ownership. Yeah, the shareholders agreement is one of the toughest ones, because you have to discuss a lot of stuff, like maybe sad stuff or heavy topics, like what happens if I die, what happens if my spouse and I get divorced, what happens if I don't know, I want to leave the business. But why would you want to leave the business? This is crazy. We'll be together forever. Yeah, but let's think the worst case scenario, and that's heavy. That's heavy discussions, and it has to be done slowly, in your own pace, in your own rhythm. Personally, I suggest that you always have someone impartial in the room to help guide the conversation, to help moderate the conversation so that it gets productive, and then you can build your ownership structure. The ownership structure is gonna give you a lot to think about in how you manage your business, and how you build your board of directors, who's gonna do what in the company, who's actually gonna work in the company, what kind of payment they're gonna have, what kind of I don't know, vacation, who's gonna be able to use the company's car. It's the simple things that normally get the biggest conflicts in the company. I've seen families fight crazy because of a company car, because I wanted to use and somebody is using, and then the other cousin bought himself a new cell phone, and I wanted a new cell phone one, and I get the what, this really small things that gets accumulated over the years, and suddenly you have like a big conflict. And then you have the family, yeah, where you actually care about your family structure, your education, the next generations to come. You have a family agreement as well, where you try to build your legacy as a family, where you try to care about the spirit, the culture of the family, and pass it along to the children, whether they're gonna work on the company or not. Yeah, in our case, my father and his 4 brothers, so we are the founders are 5 brothers, and we have more than 12 cousins in the family. Only 9 of them, 8 now, work in the company. We had cousins that used to work in the company, now doesn't anymore. And some cousins said they never wanted to work in the company and started doing for their own things. So all these family issues, they have in a specific forum for that. And that's maybe the greatest achievement here, is to know when and where to discuss each subject. So instead of putting it all together in one big dish, if you want to discuss management, results, profitability, you go to the management. If you want to think about buying a neighbor, if you want to think about the dividends, or if you want to maybe sell the business or a big project, then you have the ownership structure to help you guide that. And if you see a cousin that's not performing, or a brother that's having some trouble with his family, or maybe in the company he's not performing how it should be, then you have the family board to help you address these subjects. In terms of ownership, that's what we created. So like I said, we are five brothers. Each brother has now his own holding company, which is a family company. So for example, here TB, the first one on the left, is my father's company. Let me see if I can point it here. I won't try to do it right now. And then we have IPE, which is our major holding company, and beneath it, we have all the businesses divided into transport, farms, and so on. This is our business structure. We built it that from this, so you can see how it was and how crazy it was to know who owns what. Yeah. And so the first thing we did is organize all the farms, the trucks, the companies that we had into a more specific ownership structure. And this ownership structure, it's going to reflect the management structure. So you can see the same bar that I had there as a holding company, I have here as a corporate governance, because that's the holding company that dictates out the rules for the business, to manage the rules. So I have the 5 owners, the 5 shareholders, and they are gonna be part of a board, for example. They can be part of the board, or they can have external members as a board. And then the whole companies will set all the rules that the owners want, or how the owners want the company to be managed. And then we have the management structure. Now we have, for example, me as CEO. There's a transition that's happening this year. I was CFO until last year. We have a marketing and strategy, which is a cousin of mine, agriculture, another cousin, and transports are another cousin. So another cousin, sorry. And this year, 2025, is going to be the first year that the company is going to be run exclusively by second generation members of the family. We still have 3 of the founders on the board. We have 2 founders that are not even in the board anymore. They retired completely from the business. They are still alive, but decided that they don't want, not even in the board anymore. They want to actually retire completely. And like I said, we have in total 8 members of the second generation in the company in the most different positions, depending on what you studied, depending on your skills, and in many different levels in terms of management. So as you can see, the management structure, it tries to reflect the ownership structure, and that's very healthy in my opinion. Sorry. And when you think about family do what family has to do. So it's putting the family together, it's organizing meeting, it's keeping the bond between the members, it's celebrating the big achievements. Yeah, this year we are celebrating 50 years of the foundation of the company. So it's a big year. It's a very emotional year here. If we have many celebrations to come, the family is all together thinking about the best way to celebrate with the employees, with members of the community, friends, and so on. So if you do the other two steps right, the family becomes way more connected. It becomes lighter. You become just family. Let's say it like this. But you enjoy more each other, yeah, in the moments that we are together. So in a nutshell, that's what we did. Of course, I'm open for questions here. Just to give you a couple of key success factor in my opinion. So first of all, it's for everybody. Yeah, I hear a lot of people saying, "No, but my business is small. It's just me and my brother. It's just me and my father, so we don't need it." And I say, no, you need it. And to be honest, the simpler it looks, it might be the more complex for you to achieve, because I've seen a lot of families struggle when it's only a father and two brothers or sisters, because you get this feeling that you don't need it, and it's the most hard one to get the conversations done. We had an advantage, in my opinion, because we were 5 brothers and 12 cousins, so it's complex, and that brought us to the attention early. Like Joey said, you got to start early. So this complexity showed us that we needed to do our succession planning earlier than most of the companies did, and I see this is key. So it is for everybody. Don't ever think that you don't need it, because everybody does. And again, you don't need to do exactly what we did or what other companies do. There's not right or wrong here. I think the important here is the willingness to do it. You gotta want to do it, because you're gonna face different difficult conversations. You're gonna face opinions that diverse from you. You're gonna hear family members saying things that you never thought you'd hear. But once you get everything on the table, it gets a million times better. Yeah, I can promise you that. Of course, be open to new ideas, because it's impossible not to have changes. Yeah, and changes in the business model, changes in the system you work, in the financial, aspects. And of course, you need a lot of conversation. This is the most important part of all this process is the conversation. It doesn't matter the words that you use in your shareholders agreement, for example. The important thing is that you talked about it. So in order maybe to have one clause in the contract, you need to have month and month of conversations to reach an achievement, to reach an agreement, to see what others are doing, to get legal opinion, to get opinions on the family members. And so all these talks, they are very rich, yeah? And I'm not saying that they are just needed, but they are something you need to enjoy, yeah? Take the opportunity of have these conversations. It's maybe conversations that you are willing to have with your brother, your cousin, your son, your parents for many years now, and you never thought on how to do it. And take the opportunity of succession planning to take everything from under the mat, the like we call it, under the mattress, or under to put it on the table, to put everything on the table. So. All right, in a nutshell, that's it. That's my contacts. I'll be here to continue the section and talk about the Q&A session. But here's my contacts, my email. I know after I talk a little bit of this, many people have ideas or maybe wanted to share in private their cases and get my opinion or something. So feel free to contact me. I'll be glad to help you a little bit in any way that I can. Okay. Back to you, team. I always wanted
fantastic.
to say that.
Really appreciate that kind of perspective, again, from the trenches. You've been in the midst of it. You've had to navigate some very difficult, critical conversations, and you've been very successful by all accounts. I'm actually kind of envious. We're kind of at a crossroads with my family's operation as well. These next 10 or so years, we're going to have to figure out a successional plan, if applicable. Who knows? So with that said, we're going to open up the field to questions from the audience. And if you could write your questions in the text chat in the comments section, those are going to be funneled to me as moderator, and I will in turn kind of relay those to our speakers for today. But in the meantime, to kind of maybe prime your energies for a Q&A session, I have some prefab questions here that I wanted to discuss with our panelists. And Joey, I'm going to start with you, since I don't want you to feel left out given the questions that I sent earlier. In terms of successional planning, what are some kind of common threads? So ownership structure, I would assume. And again, for those of you who are not Americans, this is going to be very American-centric, so I apologize from the get-go. But are we looking at like C corporations, S corporations, LLCs? Are we looking at estate planning, durable power of attorney? Just all of those factors kind of amalgamated together. Do you see any common threads in terms of the clientele base that you work with?
So I would say this, Tim, kind of as global context, they're fundamentals.
Perfect.
It's starting too late, regardless of where we live in the world. When we start too late, we have less flexibility or optionality. I think the second piece, since I said it, like running on implied assumptions is just kind of wasteful. It wastes time and it wastes a lot of emotional energy. And the third would be not viewing the farm as a business, but more as a lifestyle. Vicente talked about like everything commingled together. Like we've got to parse things out and think about this as a business, regardless of the size. And then lastly, just not getting the outside people involved soon enough. Again, kind of back to starting too late, but business structure, all of those things come into play when you get the right team involved early.
Interesting. And that's actually a perfect transition. So I have a question for Vicente. You mentioned that you started to have those initial discussions about successional planning, what was it, 12 years ago or thereabouts, amongst your 5 siblings and the 12 cousins. You mentioned preparation. There was a preparation phase. What kind of prompted these discussions to begin with? What was that sense of urgency that motivated you to actually start to have these very difficult discussions? Was it like an inflection point in your business where you thought you could maybe pivot successfully? It was an opportune time?
This is a great question, Tim, because I say we were very lucky because we didn't have a big conflict or a loss in the family or an inflection point in the business. I don't know what happened in the mind of my uncles, but one day they woke up and said, this is getting complicated. We are getting bigger, the family is getting bigger, and we need help. And from that day, when they started realizing that they needed to discuss about succession and get the second generation ready to take their positions in the company and thinking about the future of the company, each day that passed since then, it's been prep day. Because we are never ready. Yeah, it never ends. It's a process that never ends. And so the day that they started and realized and said, and that comes the willingness to do it. We're gonna do it. Yeah, no matter what, we're gonna do it. We need the company. We want the company to be passed on to our children, so we'll be ready to do that. So when that clicked, prep started right away. We started with the lawyers part, helping with the ownership structure, because they saw it would be the best way to start. And to be honest, they didn't know much back then. And if you take Mato Grosso 12 years ago, we didn't have many advisors to help us in that. We had back then maybe 1 or 2 big companies that had been through the process of governance. So we were the first ones in our mid-sized company to actually have this issue on the table. We didn't have anyone to look for. So we started with some lawyers who started putting the issues on the table. We produced a lot of paperwork. To be honest, it was hard because the paperwork didn't became reality. Yeah, it's one thing to have things on the paper. The other thing is to actually live that in the practice. But then we found another advisory team that helped us get all this paperwork that we did and put it into the management practice and discuss it in the family forums, get the boards to work, that get the meetings to be more productive. But I say we were very, very lucky because my uncles, they started to realize that it was a very urgent need really early. I mean, they were in the 50s of their lives. So say they're quite active in the maybe peak of their careers, and they said, if I don't start now, I'm never going to retire. And that's how lucky we were.
So it looks like we have a question from the Philippines. So how should farmers evaluate the next generation's readiness to take over? That's a very pointed question and appropriate. So how do you gauge, as you know, to pass over the reins to the next generation, whether they're ready to assume that burden, that responsibility?
Do you want to go, Joey?
So I think about it as any other business executive. Part of being ready is preparing as an owner to let go, but also as a successor to ensure the skills are there. The interest is obviously there, I would assume, based on the question, but being sure that the skills are in place and there, and that often comes from spending time with them as owner successor, but also what are the outside leadership skills needed, and being okay as the owner and giving them permission to maybe explore outside. That also means they may come home with something that doesn't exactly agree with you, and you have to be open to that, as Vicente said. But I think using external and internal help can help assess that readiness.
So Vicente, would you insist on, the next generation maybe having some sort of credentialing in place, a master's of business administration degree, a bachelor's degree, etc.? Would that be an important element that you would insist be in place, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I would say it's in the first step is for the next generation to know what they want. Yeah, and help, and that comes part of the family. When I say that the family has an important role developing the next generation, it doesn't matter if you want to be a doctor or a farmer or anything. It is just my personal opinion. Yeah, I do not agree that children have to stay in the business. I think this kind of pressure is not helpful. The more freedom you give maybe the children to choose, and the more attractive you make your business, you can conquer them or have this appeal or the business to make them want to come to the company. And once they want to come to the company, it's a matter of where do you want to be in the company. I have cousins that are okay being in let's say low level management. Okay, for that level, the requirements are this one. But if you want to be a CEO or a CFO, then your requirements are this one. So when you have the management, the governance structure in place, you know exactly what each family member needs to develop to achieve that place, to be in that position. Because what skills do you need to be a farmer? I can say maybe 200 different ones. And so how do you choose the most important ones, and how do you develop the children to have those skills? It could be a bachelor program. I'm really big fan of having external experience, working in other companies, seeing the, let's say, outside the world for a while, do internships in other countries if possible, in other companies, in other business, to get this feeling of having a real boss that's not your father. Yeah, I really like this kind of experience, and like I said, it's the way where you want to be that's gonna set the process of your development.
Mm-hmm. So another question here, what are some strategies to help ensure open and productive discussions between generations? How do you moderate some of that tension that always seems to be brewing cross-generationally? Any tips or tricks that you've employed?
I would just add on, I would just say it's really important to know what you want as the owner. What do you want? What do you want to happen? Because it's really hard to think about having healthy conversations with other generations if you don't personally know what you want. The same is true for the other generations. What do they want? And what do they bring to what do they bring in a healthy way to the conversation? Because if we're coming from a place of how can I live out my career path in this operation or vice versa, then that's a healthy place. If we're coming from any other place, frankly, it likely will be met in a less than desirable way. And I also am not above. Get outside, get someone outside to talk about it. That's why you have a team. Have someone outside to talk about it. It doesn't have to be really, really expensive or cumbersome. It's way easier than you think to bring someone in outside, and that requires trust, but very worthwhile. Go ahead, Vicente.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this impartial person on the discussion is very important, and it doesn't have to be anybody professional. It's just someone impartial that both the generation trust, listen to, and will be open to what is being said. So building this environment of the openness and trust in the discussion is the hardest part, is the key part. Once you have that going, it will flow. It will flow naturally. It will take it on its own pace. You don't have to rush things on. What I would say is to think carefully who's going to be a part of that conversation, how you're going to get all the generations actually interested in the subject and willing to be open to discuss the points. And I agree with Joey that the third part on the table, in the room, can help a lot. Not make it personal. Yeah, make it more impartial and professional in terms of conversation.
So an objective third party to maybe help diffuse some of that potential animosity that might, and invariably will probably arise, unfortunately. It's par for the course. So I have another question here. This is to Vicente, specifically, it looks like, from Paraguay. Oftentimes, family businesses don't want to include anyone from outside the board of directors or even as shareholders. So how do you handle that? I guess that apprehension about having, perceived outsiders involved in the mix, the day-to-day operations and influencing operations.
I cannot say there's right or wrong here, because I've seen many different models and they all seem to work in its specific way. So each family has its own dynamic. Some boards, for example, are made only by family members, which I don't advise. I recommend that you have external members in the discussion, even if they don't have votes. So this is an important technical part. You can have external people in the discussion, but they don't vote anything. So at the end of the day, the decision is still in the family, but you are listening to other people. We have a very interesting case in Brazil, a big pipe company. It's just one family member, just one guy. He owns everything, but he has a board of 15 people that he listens to. At the end of the day, he decides what to do alone. They don't vote, but he has 15 good people that he brought from the market and pays them good money to help him make the good decision. So you don't have to compromise your family structure or your business structure to listen to other people. That's my view.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Joey, as a professional advisor?
Yeah, I think Vicente covered it mostly. I would just echo his sentiment. We're so guarded that when we can let down the barriers as we think about it as a business, it's a business first. And if we were in any other boardroom, you would have outside people. Again, some are voting executives, some are voting board members, some are not. But when we think about it as an enterprise, it starts to let down some of the walls that lead us to believe that we have to solve all of it within our own family walls. I mean, no business would do that successfully long term.
Mhm.
And if I may add something here, this is very interesting, because it's not having external people in the room. It's very important because not only you are listening to a different opinion, but you behave differently when you have some external in the company. So if I have an advisor that's from another business and you have to explain to him your business, you think it differently. You ask yourself questions and you put in the table subjects that for you were granted. And you start to looking at your own business differently just because there's someone sitting on the table that's from another business or from another country or from another experience. So it's very rich.
So it forces you to be reflective and introspective. Right. Perfect. Okay. So I have another question here. So how can the subject of generational succession be broached tactfully to ensure that the legacy is maintained, especially when that previous generation is approaching kind of retirement age? I guess to maintain the peace, to feel that older generation isn't being forcibly, pushed out of the day-to-day, that it's being done voluntarily. What are your thoughts on that?
So I get this question all the time, and I'm living this. I live this question. Full disclosure, I am not a successor in a third generation family farm. And so my interests may look different. My interests look like protecting what my family's wishes are to keep things together, avoiding estate taxes, and avoiding probate. But otherwise, I want to protect my loved ones. But how to approach the discussion? I approach it from the standpoint only after I had my own estate plan in place. So getting my own work done, albeit simple, right? Relative to that of a more complex operation, it then gives me credibility on the Sunday night phone call to say, what do you got going on this week, or what's going on? I can legitimately say, we're working on our estate plan. Powers of attorneys, healthcare directives, all the things that we need in the states. And it gives me credibility to be able to ask the question from a curiosity perspective, again, out of concern for protecting our loved ones. Go ahead, Vicente, if you had something
Vicente,
to
do you
add.
have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Joey mentioned something before that's quite important also. We think you usually think a lot and invest a lot of time and money investing the ones that are coming to the business, the next generation, and we do not invest enough time in prepping the ones who are leaving. So what's the next step for them? Yeah, what you're gonna do once you're not in operation? And this is really hard and really psychological, tough, because probably they lived a life in the business and there's no other life for them. They don't see themselves, I don't know, sailing on a boat across the Atlantic. I don't know. They might have hobbies, they might have not. So maybe you have to invest in some kind of ways for them to be present at the company, but less with less responsibility, less weights on the shoulders, and to take some time, a lot of time actually, to think about the ones that are leaving the business, what they're gonna do. It's very, very important because they gotta see some future. Yeah, you cannot just come to the table and say, now you're done, get out. You're not doing it anymore. They panic. To be honest, they panic. I've done this for my entire life. What do I do now? So you gotta think about ways. This could be a board where you have meetings. This could have family meetings as well. It could be partying with the family. It could be traveling. It could be living on the farm in a new house or something, or a new place where you can live on the farm, but doesn't actually need to take the big decisions. Yeah, it's a lighter position, but also being present, being there. It could be a legacy. Yeah, like having. We love to have the. I don't know the name in English, but something like the history moment where we or the stories moment where the older generation tell the youngest the stories about the past, you know, what happened when they were driving the first truck 40, 50 years ago. So you got to think about them leaving the company. Yeah, you cannot let them high and dry. Yeah.
I have one more add-on to that, Tim. I get this question a lot in terms, I always ask clients and prospective clients, how can I help you further? And it is so frequent that I get, can you just call my parents and check on them? Can you just call my parents? Don't tell them that you sent me. But they're people that I know in the community. I'm a trusted advisor in the realm of their children. Just calling, I happen to have a cue that maybe they don't have their stuff in order. But if I can just help instigate that as a third party, there's no harm in that. It's out of concern and out of love. But if they don't want to talk to me about it as a kid, as the child, they may be willing, and they often are willing to talk to another trusted advisor.
So you've cultivated that rapport over many years, and that's much valued as that kind of external trusted third party. Another point with, you know, handing over the reins from parents to children, etc., you got to think about the self-worth component, right? So if they feel that they're being shunted out of the operation, where does that leave them? Like Vicente said, they're not necessarily going to be boating on the Caribbean, etc. They might want to still have a somewhat active, you know, day-to-day operational presence in the farm. So, and that kind of parallels what happened with my grandfather when he handed over the reins to my cousin. My grandfather still stayed on in a consultative capacity, but that weight, that burden that Vicente said, right, had been lifted from his shoulders, so he could be very candid about what he thought about how my cousin was running the day-to-day without fear of reprisal, right? So I think that's very important.
I have a great analogy that I heard once from an advisor, that he said for the older generation, for the parents, in case, how to be in the company but not to get but without the responsibility of the business. So you enter the farm with your hands within your pockets and your nose quite open, so you smell everything but your hands are in your pocket, so you don't do anything. You just smell it and you see it and you look it and you observe it, and then you pass everything that you need to your son or your nephew or anybody that's actually responsible for those activities. So hands in the pocket, nose and eyes in everything. That's actually very rich as well for the business, because this feeling, this experience that the founders have, we're never going to have as second generation, third, and so on. We will never have the same feeling of the ones that built the company, built the business. So it's very important, actually, for the one who wanted to stay in the job, to have this position of advising the next generation. So, and that's looking but not interfering. That's the analogy. And
that sums it up perfectly. Absolutely. So it looks like we're just a couple minutes away from hitting the hour. It's not a hard stop necessarily. We can go beyond that. But I want to invite everyone to follow the Global Farmer Network if you're not already, and visit the website, www.globalfarmernetwork.org, which looks like it's been put on the screen there. Very timely. So, Gina, do we have any other questions from the audience that I can address? I don't see anything in the chat. I know there was one question that we definitely wanted to close with in terms of smallholder, first-generation farmers who don't necessarily prioritize successional planning. They don't, see the value. What would you, Vicente and Joey, say to that?
Yeah, I would say even for smallholder farms or family that are smaller, the organization, that the level of organization that you get in your business, even if it's just you and your wife and maybe it's the sons, the children, sons and daughters, the level of organization that this methodology brings to you enable for you to see what's business, what's private life, what's family, you get to see things differently, and it's very rich, even if you're not planning on succession right away, even if you're not seeing that in the short future. But it's gonna help you a lot to understand what's business and see business as a business, what's family, see family as a family, and what's ownership. And it might help you get a lot of question answered on how to do it, what I do next year, what I'm gonna be my next moves as a farmer. It helps you organize your private finance, your private life, your cash flow, this kind of management tools that are quite important in any farm. So I'd say for everyone, again, get it started. Get it started. It doesn't matter if you're going to take 1 year, 10 years, or 20 years. Day one is step one. It's what you got to do now. Yeah.
I would just add quickly, Tim, don't forget about your personal financial situation beyond the farm. It's just so often that we dump everything we have into the operation that we don't think about the unforeseen or the what ifs that could make us further constrained in our later years. When we're not able, for whatever reason, to run the day-to-day operations, when we think about that as the foundation, it really frees us up to think about what's our long-term purpose, what's my identity beyond the farm, and what's the identity of the farm beyond me.
Okay, it looks like the audience is not going down in terms of numbers. So were there any other questions that the audience members had for our panelists? Again, we don't have to do a hard stop at 10 o'clock necessarily. I want to be mindful of Vicente and Joey's time and expertise.
Okay. No, it's okay.
But by the same token, we want to make sure all questions are addressed. So you have a platform here. Please take advantage. Feel free with the expertise in the room. All answered, apparently. Okay. Well, with that said, I want to thank both of you, so Vicente and Joey, for joining us today and providing your real-world anecdotes about familial farm succession. Thank you, Roar. It's good to see you. It's been a while. Just chatting with her on the text chat. So again, if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure Vicente and Joey would be happy to entertain them via email, etc. We could certainly get you in touch. I could talk with Gina. And I have some vantage points as well. If you're interested, if I could ever be of service in an informal capacity, don't hesitate to reach out, please. So that said, great session today, and we hope to see you at subsequent sessions in the future. Hope everyone has a good one. Take care.